nature. The stormy surf causing 5 houses to collapse in less than an hour yesterday before a 6th was destroyed overnight. Officials say the homes were unoccupied following damage this summer from hurricane.
For months, scientists said we had time. They told us the erosion models were conservative. They promised California's coastline would hold, at least through 2030. They were wrong. In the last 90 days, the Pacific has claimed what was supposed to take 5 years. Beaches that have stood for centuries, gone in weeks. Cliffside homes worth millions, hanging by literal threads. And now, after emergency meetings behind closed doors, after 3 federal disaster declarations in 2 months, California's governor just made an announcement that should terrify every coastal resident in America. Because what's happening in California isn't just about California anymore. This is about what happens when decades of denial meet the reality of physics. And physics always wins. The state that promised it was ready, the state that spent billions on coastal resilience, just admitted it has no idea how to stop what's coming next. And the timeline? It's already here. The governor's admission. On January 8th, 2026, Governor Gavin Newsom stood in front of cameras in Sacramento and said something California politicians have avoided saying for 20 years. Our current coastal defense infrastructure is inadequate for the rate of erosion we're now experiencing. Let that sink in. Not we need improvements. Not we're monitoring the situation. Inadequate. As in, what we built doesn't work. As in, the plan failed. But here's what he didn't say in that press conference, and what leaked documents from the California Coastal Commission reveal. They knew. They've known since November 2025 that erosion rates were accelerating beyond worst-case models. They've known that the $4.2 billion spent on seawalls, beach replenishment, and cliff stabilization since 2020 bought maybe 3 years of time instead of the projected 15. The admission came after 3 months of catastrophic collapses that made headlines, but what you didn't see were the internal emergency meetings, the calls with FEMA, the geological surveys that showed entire neighborhoods, not just houses, entire neighborhoods, are now classified as imminently vulnerable. Newsom announced a new $7.8 billion emergency coastal protection package. More seawalls, more beach sand, more cliff reinforcement, the same strategies that just failed but bigger. Here's the problem. You can't outspend physics. And California is learning that lesson in real time. The reality on the ground.
Highway 1 near Big Sur has created a logistical nightmare for Caltrans and for residents. As many as 2,000 people were stranded over the weekend. Now they're being escorted.
Let's talk about what faster than predicted actually means in human terms. Pacifica, just south of San Francisco, December 2025. A 200-foot section of coastal cliff collapsed in 48 hours, not gradually eroded. Collapsed. 8 homes that were deemed safe for at least a decade in 2023 are now condemned. The cliff they sat on? It's in the ocean. The Palisades, Los Angeles County, January 2026. A luxury apartment complex built in 1987, 40 years of withstanding Pacific storms, lost its entire western retaining wall in 1 weekend. The building is still standing, barely. Residents were given 72 hours to evacuate. Property value? Down 90% overnight. Who wants to buy an apartment that might be in the ocean next month? San Clemente. The railroad tracks that connect San Diego to Los Angeles, critical infrastructure for both passenger trains and freight, are now less than 15 feet from a crumbling cliff edge. They were 80 feet from the edge in 2020. That's 65 feet of erosion in 5 years. At the current rate, those tracks have maybe 6 months before they're suspended over empty air. This isn't about losing beaches for summer vacations. This is about infrastructure collapse. This is about highways, railways, water treatment plants, and power stations, all built with the assumption that the coastline was stable. It wasn't. It isn't. And every day, the Pacific proves it. The numbers that don't lie.
Here's what the geological surveys actually show. The data California spent months trying to quietly assess before going public.
Current erosion rate along Southern California's coastline, 12 to 18 feet per year. The 2020 projections, 3 to 5 feet per year. That's not a little off. That's 3 to 4 times faster than the worst-case models predicted. In Northern California, sections of Highway 1, the iconic coastal highway that generates billions in tourism revenue, are eroding at 20 feet per year in some areas. Engineers estimated they'd need to address this by 2035. They're now scrambling to reroute sections by summer 2026. The state identified 47,000 structures currently within the immediate erosion zone, meaning they could be compromised within 5 years at current rates. That number was 12,000 in the 2023 assessment. It nearly quadrupled in 2 years. Property values in coastal erosion zones have dropped by an average of 40% since October 2025. Not because houses are damaged, because insurance companies are pulling out, banks won't write mortgages, and buyers know the land under these homes might not exist in a decade. And here's the number that explains the panic: $150 billion. That's the estimated value of infrastructure and property now classified as high risk for erosion damage by 2030. California's emergency fund for coastal protection, $7.8 billion. They're short by $142 billion. You can't math your way out of that gap. The chain reaction nobody talks about. When a coastline collapses faster than predicted, it doesn't just affect beachfront homeowners. It sets off a chain reaction that most people never see coming. First, property values collapse, not just for oceanfront homes, for entire communities. Because when your neighbor's house is condemned, when roads are closed, when schools shut down because the building is too close to an unstable cliff, your property becomes worthless too. Towns like Pacifica are watching their tax base evaporate as property assessments plummet. Second, insurance markets freeze. Major insurers, State Farm, Allstate, Farmers, have already pulled out of high-risk coastal areas. The remaining insurers quadrupled premiums. Homeowners who've paid mortgages for 20 years now can't afford to insure the homes they own, can't sell, can't insure, can't leave, trapped in an asset that's losing value by the day. Third, infrastructure failures cascade. When a section of Highway 1 closes, tourism collapses for entire regions. Small towns that depend on coastal visitors, revenue down 60% in some areas since road closures began. Restaurants closing, hotels empty, workers laid off. All because the road that brought visitors is too dangerous to drive. Fourth, climate migration begins. Not in the future. Now, families who can afford to leave are leaving, selling at massive losses or just abandoning properties. The California Coastal Commission estimates 15,000 to 20,000 residents have already permanently relocated from high-risk coastal areas since mid-2025. That's just the beginning. And finally, political fallout. Governor Newsom is facing calls for resignation from both sides: conservatives who say the state wasted billions on failed solutions, and progressives who say the state didn't act aggressively enough. California's coastal crisis is becoming a national political issue as federal disaster funds flow west, and other states ask why their tax dollars are bailing out millionaire beachfront property owners. This isn't just an environmental crisis. It's economic, it's social, it's political, and it's accelerating. The promise that broke. In 2020, California launched the Resilient Coastline Initiative, $4.2 billion to protect the state's most vulnerable coastal areas. The governor at the time promised it would future-proof California's coastline for generations. They built seawalls. They trucked in millions of tons of sand to replenish beaches. They installed cliff-face netting and deep foundation anchors. State-of-the-art engineering, cutting-edge coastal science. It bought 3 years instead of 15. Because here's what engineers are now admitting: the models were based on historical erosion rates. They didn't fully account for accelerating sea level rise, combined with increasing storm intensity. They didn't predict that Pacific storm patterns would shift, hitting the coast with more frequency and more force than any decade on record. The infrastructure wasn't bad. The assumptions were. And now California is left with billions in failed coastal defenses and a coastline that's eroding faster every month. They can't build seawalls fast enough. They can't replenish beaches faster than storms wash the sand away. They can't stabilize cliffs when the entire geological structure is being undercut by wave action. The promise wasn't broken by incompetence. It was broken by reality. What happens next? Governor Newsom's new emergency package includes expanded evacuation programs, property buyouts for high-risk areas, and accelerated infrastructure relocation. Translation: the state is giving up on protecting some areas and focusing on managed retreat, abandoning coastline and moving critical infrastructure inland. But here's the uncomfortable truth nobody wants to say out loud. If California, one of the wealthiest states in the richest country on earth, can't stop its coastline from collapsing, what does that mean for the rest of America? Florida's facing similar acceleration on both coasts. The Carolinas are watching their barrier islands disappear. Louisiana has lost 2,000 square miles of coastline since 1930, and the rate is increasing. The Gulf Coast, the Eastern Seaboard, the Pacific Northwest. California isn't an outlier, it's the warning. And right now, that warning is being ignored everywhere, except where the cliffs are actively falling into the ocean. There's a couple in Pacifica, Sarah and Tom Chen, who bought their dream home in 2018. 3 bedrooms, ocean view, walking distance to the beach. They saved for 15 years for that down payment. Last month, engineers told them they have to evacuate. The cliff their house sits on is eroding at 17 feet per year. At that rate, their backyard will be gone by summer. Their house? Maybe by 2027. They can't sell. No one will buy. Their insurance was canceled. The mortgage is still due every month. They're paying for a house that will cease to exist. 200 miles south, there's a train conductor named Marcus Rodriguez, who's been running the Pacific Surfliner route for 12 years. He now drives past sections of track where on his right, there's rail, and on his left, there's nothing but a 100-foot drop to the ocean. He does this twice a day. The state says the track is safe. The engineers say it's safe for now. Marcus doesn't sleep well anymore. Governor Newsom says California is adapting, that the state is leading the nation in coastal resilience, that the new plan will work where the old one didn't. But the Pacific doesn't care about plans. It doesn't negotiate. It doesn't slow down because politicians ask it to. And every morning, it takes a little more of California with it.